Hi guys, so I've said before in the past, we need to stop listening to politicians, especially when it comes to Brexit, and start listening to experts, people who are actually in the industry. This is their bread and butter, this is their livelihood. They need to be on top of this. And when it comes to Brexit, it's pretty bad on the surface, but the experts are able to scratch away and show us what's deep inside, and it isn't pretty. So you're going to hear from a logistics expert who's going to explain two main issues here: tariffs and immigration in respect to Brexit. So let's hear what she had to say.
The real issue, I suppose, is, when the agreement came to be on the 24th of December, it was hailed as a free trade agreement, and there was palpable size of relief across, organisations, not just logistics, not just freight forwarding, but shippers also thinking, okay, we've avoided that nasty, thorny issue of tariffs and trades. Unfortunately, the rule of origin is an area that's caught a lot of organisations out in terms of trades and tariffs, and therefore you now have to classify your products by their rules of origin and make sure that they qualify for these preferential tariffs and taxes that have come out as part of the free trade agreement. The issue here, Rob, is complexity of product. Okay, so if it's a straightforward bought in finished goods, it's fairly easily handled. If you're transforming it to a certain degree, depending on the components of the product, it may or may not qualify for the preferential tariffs within the free trade agreement. Some products are actually classified by the gov.uk website as hard to classify items.
Hard to classify items. So the government itself, the UK government, is saying to businesses, we can't actually classify this item, or this item is difficult to classify. So how is a business supposed to know whether it will be, whether a tariff will be applied to it, if the government itself doesn't know whether the product will have a tariff applied to it? Like, how are you supposed to plan? You say, okay, I'm going to produce a good for export, and you want to know whether there's a tariff that's going to be applied to it, because if there's a tariff, it may not be feasible, may not be profitable to actually export that product. But you don't know until the product has been produced and it has been exported, because when it arrives in the other country, if there's a tariff applied, then you know whether it's feasible or not. But that's too late. And the British government actually can't help businesses out here because they don't know. When you have to follow a rule, you normally go to the person who's writing the rule. You ask them, what is the rule? What do I have to follow? But if the person who's writing the rule can't actually articulate the rule, then how the hell are you supposed to follow it?
Footwear, automotive, chemical products, anything with any kind of synthesis is going to be very, very difficult to classify correctly, with absolute traceability and understanding where your products have come from. So while organisations were delighted that the free trade agreement had been struck, the onion peeling element of this Brexit deal, or this move now into the UK no longer being part of the EU, has caught an awful lot of, particularly food suppliers, because they were particularly perishable food suppliers. They were hit first and hardest because they're moving product in a swifter way rather than buffering stock.
And we've seen examples of that, of companies who had, for example, this isn't related to rules of origin, but companies who had maybe milk products or animal products within their main product, and they needed health certificates for that. Now, of course, if you were to ask Brexiteers and politicians who are Brexiteers, they would dismiss this before as Project Fear. No, don't worry, there will be no restrictions. Don't worry, there won't be any tariffs. Don't worry, everything will flow as before. Because they're not experts. And unfortunately, the media refer to non-experts when it comes to understanding the reality of trade and logistics.
As stocks are depleted, more and more organisations are going to be faced with the rule of origin challenge. Okay. So it's certainly not straightforward. It's certainly complex. Some organizations have decided that in tracing the classification of their goods is far too costly, far too complicated, and what they're better off doing is just paying the tariff.
That's insane. So you say, look, I produce this product, I sell it, and the actual logistics involved in trying to understand whether there's a tariff or not is just too complicated, so I'll just pay the tariff. How is this a benefit, once again, of Brexit? You have to remember, the further we move away from when the UK was a member, the worse people's memories will be. And I think it's important for people to remember that none of this was necessary just over 3 months ago. About 3 months ago. And it's still being unfolded. It's still unraveling.
Okay.
So it's not as straightforward as originally thought.
Companies really have to do their homework on this particular issue.
Indeed.
What about the issue of immigration as it relates to skilled workers? Another big change.
Indeed, and particularly this, when I'm speaking to clients, has caught an awful lot of organisations as well by surprise. They're not really that aware of it. So if you're sourcing labour, and particularly within the sector of the UK and services sector of the UK, if you're sourcing EU labour for seasonality or for long-term prospects, there are a suite of charges that come now with facilitating that. So first of all, you have to be an immigration sponsor. There's a fee attached to that. I believe it's £1,456 sterling just to become an immigration sponsor. Should you want to source your labour from the EU, and a lot of warehousing and logistics operations do that, both in the UK and here in Ireland, but it's particularly relevant for the UK, you're going to pay £1,000 sterling for each person that you bring in now post the 1st of January. For organisations, particularly logistics that are operating on very tight operational budgets, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of overhead. That's a lot of costs they wouldn't have potentially factored into their budgets. Mm-hmm. And that £1,000 sterling only lasts for the first year. Every 6 months subsequently after that, it's £500 sterling.
So it's £1,000 per year and then £500 after that. Once again, a Brexit dividend, a Brexit benefit. None of this was necessary before, and now businesses have to pay these extra costs. But remember, it's not just the businesses. The businesses will pass it on, of course, to the consumer, to the end user of these products. So ordinary people will pay more for Brexit. And I've said this continually on the channel. The likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage will not be affected by this. They don't care. They will not be financially worse off. The ordinary people at the very bottom, they will be worse off. The ones who were convinced to vote for this. The ones who were convinced that it would benefit the UK in some way. How is this beneficial? It's making companies less competitive. It's making companies tear their hair out trying to understand whether their products are affected by tariffs or not. And in some cases, as we've heard, companies are just sending goods anyway and paying the tariff. And the fact that you want to hire skilled staff that you perhaps can't find in the local area, you can't find perhaps in the UK, it's more difficult to find them, you want to bring them in from abroad, well then there's a cost related to that. And that's going to be passed on to the consumer as well. I'll leave a link to the full interview in the description of the video. I do recommend checking it out. But let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server, where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons, where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?